part one of our conversation with Tom Shieh, you may recall that he was on top of his entrepreneurial game when we left off, making a killer profit and moving a ton of inventory. However, there was a huge but. Find out what that but is next in part two of our interview with Tom.
Welcome to this edition of Peak Performance Podcast with your host, Thor Conklin. Thor will be sharing the necessary tools, strategies, and psychology you'll need to become a peak performer in any area of your life or business.
Thor Conklin here. We give you the tricks, the tips, the tools, the strategy, the technology, and the psychology peak performers use in order to get more done and execute at the highest level. If you know what to do but struggle with getting it all done, or simply want to raise your game to the next level, this podcast is for you. Sit back and enjoy.
Everything seemed good, and extremely happy, feeling fulfilled. Felt like everything I touched turned into gold. Joined the Tony Robbins Platinum Partnership. Worked with Keith Cunningham. Attended a variety of different seminars. Continued to grow and networked and rub shoulders with some terrific, amazing people. I felt like I was on top of the world.
Is there a butt coming?
There is. You sense the setup.
I did.
Yeah. So, one of my business mentors, Keith, like I mentioned, Keith Cunningham, he reminded me very early when he looked at this, and he said, "Hey, Tom, like, you've got so many things going on. Is it possible to simplify? Because there's no way that everything can be optimized." And to him, he wasn't impressed with, whether it was 50 websites, 100 websites, or 1,000 websites. What he was focused upon was not just revenue, but profit, and not just profit, but cash. And so that was a new concept to me, because at that point I was still very caught up in, how can I get my revenue number as big as possible?
Yeah. Keith's like that.
Yeah, Keith is amazing in that regard. And, we even had some disagreements at certain times. And I'm like, well, but I could do this. If these things just, stayed at a fraction of what they are, like, I'm good. You know what I mean? And
he said, let me guess what he said. Tom, I think you're smoking your own tailpipe.
Yeah, he said, Tom, you want to be right or you want to be rich?
That's right.
And so,
that's right.
And so he had a lot of those one-liners, and he had some very choice language that he would use certain times to get my attention. And I was wise enough to see and understand some of the things that he said. And at that time, I wasn't mature enough to also appreciate some of the other things that he mentioned. And so here's the but. Yeah. So the but comes where all of a sudden Google changes some algorithms. And so overnight, some of these websites that I would make collectively hundreds of thousands of dollars a year start to dwindle down to like 70%, getting 70% of the traffic I used to 50% of the traffic I used to get, to 20%, down to like 10% of the traffic that I would used to get. And then Google goes and unleashes a number of different algorithm changes. There's different competitors that come up. Amazon themselves start to change some of their policy and their rules and their fees, which kind of eventually squeeze you out. Some of our vendors become competitors, and it just becomes harder and harder to do business. And then as I'm working on my portfolio and continuing to grow that, I'm still acquiring, still working on things. So it's not like everything went to bust. We were still growing in different ways. It was just, I just learned to be thinner and more strategic, and to be less wasteful in terms of the things that we invested our time and energy on. And then I joined up with another person in a private equity fund, kind of combined my portfolios with their portfolios. That did not end very well. I wish I could go into a little bit more detail, but there are some legal matters and bankruptcy court situations where, and potentially the Securities Exchange Commission that's still researching that right now. So I'll reserve some comments about that until later. But long story short, in a span of about 2 years, I end up myself, our family, along with friends and family who had invested in certain aspects of that fund, end up losing millions of dollars. And so about 2 years ago, I found myself in a very, very, very dark place. To the extent where I would, and I'm a pretty positive, optimistic person.
Absolutely.
And I feel like, for the experiences and the circumstances in which I was brought up, I'm fairly grounded. But I'll tell you, that experience, people will say, your self-worth is not tied to your net worth. But when you have that experience, something where not only have you potentially lost everything, but you potentially hurt the people that you cared most about around you, it really gives you a wake-up call, and it really helps you focus on what are priorities, what's important in your life, and who you really are. Not who you think you are, or who you say you are, or what you post that you are on Facebook or social media, but who you truly are at the core when these things that you feel like you're identified by are stripped away. So I would wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. My daughter would say things like "Baba wa ai ni," or which in Mandarin Chinese is "Daddy, I love you," and I would have to run to the bathroom to cry because I didn't want them to see me crying. All the negative self-talk of why you should have did this, why you didn't do that, or I can't believe you made such a big mistake or such a stupid decision. All that internal dialogue, all those voices came in my head. I was just really, really struggling. I mean, I remember, not wanting to get up when I woke up, and then just kind of bumming around, and then, you don't want to go to sleep, and then you really didn't want to do anything. So that was a very, very challenging time for me, the past 2 years. But I believe, looking back in my life, I firmly believe that's one of my guiding principles, is that, God is for me. He's not against me, and that life is happening for me. It's not happening to me. And so there's a greater reward, there's a greater gift in this if I'm able to see, if I'm able to just have the perspective and the openness and the willingness to see things from a higher perspective, a higher level. What gift could this bring for not only myself, but to my family and to others? What lessons could I teach my children, not just with words, but with action, and with my legacy, and the way that I live, and the way that I carry out on a day-to-day basis. So I did a lot of soul searching, and I realized that, hey, there's no way in the world the 38-year-old version of Tom would ever lose the 18-year-old version of Tom, both pretty much starting at the same place financially, because the 38-year-old version is much more connected. He's much more resourceful. He's wiser. He's more experienced. There's no way the 38-year-old version would lose, except unless the 38-year-old version started developing this, victim syndrome of why me, and this pity, and just getting stuck in this tunnel, not being able to break out. Because the 18-year-old version, man, that guy was hungry. Everything was possible. He had tons of energy. He was willing to try anything. And so that's to this day, that's what I think about is what would the 18-year-old version of Tom do? And so, I feel tremendously blessed. Over the last 2 years, we've made tremendous strides in our business, and we've turned quite a few things around. I'm still not where I know we can be, but we are making progress on a day-to-day basis, and I'm tremendously thankful, blessed, and proud of that.
Well, first of all, a couple points on this. One, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that with us. And for those that don't know Keith Cunningham, first of all, you have an amazing mentor because Keith lost, about $130 million back in '86 in the real estate bust when the S&Ls went down. And he knows what it's like to go from on top of the world to literally nothing. He was, $8 million in debt or something when he was done?
Yeah, he had phantom income.
Yeah, he had phantom income. Tried to pay his tax bill with phantom money. That didn't work. And literally, he tells a story about hanging out in the corner of a major corner in Austin, Texas, where all his buddies would be going to work. And he decides one day he needs to just get this out in the open and let the world know that he played his cards and he played them wrong. And he had a sign, literally, like he was homeless, sitting on the side of the road with a sign that says, "Played my cards, played them wrong." I don't know. Did it say "I'll be back" or what? Did I get that correct?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact verbiage or the words, but I think the sentiment was that he embraced his fear of people kind of finding out. He kind of drew a line and said that this was a chapter in his life and that he was planning to move forward. And I think that's such a powerful decision.
Yeah.
We have that ability to make that decision, whether you're standing on the side of the street, feeling like, embarrassed that your friends and loved ones may see you, or you're making a decision at 3 a.m. when you wake up in the middle of the night. Yeah. That conscious decision is tremendously powerful.
And he's come back, and he has a net worth now that was higher than it was back then. So, was there a point? When you got out of that dark place, was it a moment where you kind of crawled out, or was it a moment where you just walked out and then shut the door behind you?
That's a terrific question. There are days where I would enthusiastically say, "No, I shut that door." I got out, I shut the door, I locked it, and I never looked back. But there are also days where I'm like, I think I'm still crawling.
Yeah.
And so I think like I mentioned earlier, the power is making a decisive action, this decision to say, look, this is over. It's in the past. I'm not going to give it any more energy. I need to move forward. I need to move ahead. And I learned a lot about that in rally racing recently as well. But to realize that sometimes these things, that there may be anchors, there may be situations, or there may be circumstances that will happen that will immediately trigger some of these previous thoughts or disempowering beliefs or feelings of limitation or lack or scarcity. And to give yourself the grace to say, okay, I understand that, but I'm not those feelings. I'm not that person. And so to feel it, embrace it, but also adjust and move on and take the actions. And so to answer your question, I would say, 90% I've definitely moved on. But there are times and there are days, particularly when I'm fatigued and tired, or particularly when certain circumstances arise, I find myself having less and less that tendency, but that path is still there if I choose to want to wallow it.
Yeah. Yeah, I went through a major business loss, and it really shook me to my core, because one of my core beliefs was, and still is that I can do anything I set my mind to. And it was like, wait a second, this can't be happening. This has never happened to me up to this point. And everything I've done has turned to gold. And this just has to be like a little bump in the road. This is not real. Right. And it really can shake you. And it took me a long time to get back on my game. But I will tell you that when you're back on your game, you're just stronger.
Yes.
And you can't learn less. And things seem to be a lot clearer. Clarity is something, when you go through a really difficult time like that, things get a lot clearer. Where I made decisions based on, I saw some red flags, right? And I'm like, red flags. That means I just go in there, I just eat them up, And it ain't that big, right? Because you're looking at this little red flag, it's in the distance, and then all of a sudden you realize when it gets up close, you've got a major issue. Now I'm able to see those things way, way before they're red, and I've got such greater insight than I ever have.
Yeah, that's very, very well put. One of the things I've heard is that human beings are the only animals that will continue to accelerate when they're lost. And, other animals will realize that they need to take heed or slow down or observe and see what's going on. And I think part of that is wisdom and maturity.
Yeah.
And I am, I really, I look back and I smile because I thought I knew so much about business, so much about life, just even years ago, or even last week, and I'm realizing that I'm still constantly learning, constantly growing, and it's great to have that maturity to be able to reflect and be able to pause and be able to have discernment.
So bring us into the next chapter. Here you are, went through this, you're coming out the other end, you've got all this knowledge, you have all this experience, you have all the success in this area. The landscape has changed. Amazon is no longer letting you feed in the overstocked feed. I love that story, by the way. And the landscape is always changing. We've always got to be adjusting and pivoting.
Yes.
What is the play now in this? First of all, are you still playing in this space?
I am playing in this space.
Good.
My main focus right now, the last couple of years, is a company called CrimCheck, which I serve as the CEO for. CrimCheck is a background screening company. We do like pre-employment screening. And so what I focused over the last couple of years is really on sustainable growth and building that company. So we were honored this year being in the Inc. 5000 list, which is, I only mention that because it's.
That's a big deal.
I'm proud of it.
It's a real big deal.
Based upon what I know that the sacrifice and the effort that they had to put in to accomplish that. And so what I've focused on over the last couple of years has been leveraging my previous experience in internet marketing and understanding that process and technology and applied it to CrimCheck. And so, I have a terrific team around me. Gentleman named Lauren. He's the chief operating officer, tremendous in technology. I have Jerry and Jeff. I could go on and on about the people in the company. But what we've done is we've slightly pivoted to our identity. Instead of being a background screening company, I really view us as a technology company. Just happen to be in the background screening space. So over the last couple of years, we've done a tremendous amount of investments and time and energy in automation and innovation in our processes and technology. So kind of using what I previously did, but just in a more brick and mortar feel. So we have investigators. We've got a staff of about 30 people. We have investigators, quality control. So it's no longer just listing things and using software. But at the end of the day, a lot of those processes, a lot of those thoughts, a lot of the scalability components can be duplicated.
If you're not getting the results you want and need, I guarantee no one's holding you accountable. Now, let's face it, who really wants to be held accountable? Not me, right? Nobody. Why would you want to be held accountable? It's not part of our nature. However, if you want to get exceptional results, you must be held accountable. For $95 a month, our team will hold you accountable to those goals that you want to accomplish in any given month. If you don't like it, ask for your money back. But truly, if you're not getting the results, it's because no one's holding you accountable. The only question is, are you willing to step up?
Be on the lookout for part 3 of our talk with Tom, where he tells us the 3 business lessons he learned from racing rally cars, as well as how he sees technology moving forward. I'll see you guys on another edition of Peak Performers Podcast.